Abelard Gottschalk? He was kind of cute. Betsy looked thoughtful. Then she shook her head. It wouldn't work. Just then one of the waitresses walked up to the table. "Merari, he's here." At those words Betsy went pale. "Thank you," Merari said. "Bring him right over." She turned to Betsy. "I think I've got just the thing to take your mind off of Albert." The waitress led over a young man of perhaps 13 years who was dressed in browns and grays. Like a good reporter, Betsy studied him while he approached. The first thing she noticed was his large, hawk-like nose. She actually thought it gave him a unique look. As he crossed the room, patrons stepped aside to avoid brushing the sword that hung from his belt. As he neared, his startling dark eyes zeroed in on Betsy. She flushed at being caught studying him so openly. "Madam Semsa," the young man turned to Merari, "it's a pleasure to see you again." "As it is to see you," Merari said, and then turned to her friend. "Betsy, I would like you to meet Cyrano de Bergerac." "Cyrano? Oh, they wrote plays about you!" All thoughts of Albert flew from her mind. Betsy stood to offer de Bergerac her hand. Rather than shake, in the American style, he turned it and kissed her knuckles. If he had been a few years older, Betsy would have been flattered. As it was, she thought it was cute. She could easily see where the older Cyrano would get his reputation for being a great romantic. "I'm told they exaggerated the size of my nose somewhat," he said ruefully. "You know what they say about a man's nose," Betsy replied. Then her eyes grew wide as she realized what she had said. Cyrano lifted a single eyebrow in question. He was obviously trying to appear worldly and cool, but a furious red blush darkened the back of his neck and cheeks. "That would be where my other reputation comes from. Monsieur de Bergerac is taking a grand tour of Europe. He and his companion have traveled some way out of their way so he can speak with you, Betsy." "Really? Where is your companion?" By the way that Merari said the word, Betsy assumed that by companion, Merari actually meant guardian. Cyrano's eyes twinkled. "Regrettably, my cousin was detained in Badenburg on pressing business. I decided not to wait on him." Betsy took an instant liking to Cyrano. Her favorite girlhood activities were the ones she'd undertaken while the babysitter was detained on pressing business elsewhere. "So what can I do for you?" she asked. "Monsieur de Bergerac is interested in your knowledge of uptime cinema." Merari looked from Betsy to Cyrano in bemusement, as if she wasn't quite certain that introducing the two had been a good idea. "He is a budding playwright, and he wants to write a play based on an uptime movie in order to gain some notoriety." "Which one?" Betsy asked. She ran through a mental list of movies that could easily be converted into stage productions. One that was adapted from a stage production, such as The Odd Couple or The Front Page, would be perfect, she thought. "Have you ever heard of Our Miss Brooks?" Betsy tilted her chair back and suppressed a laugh. "As a matter of fact, I have, but it wasn't a movie. It was a radio sitcom when my grandpa was my age. They made a TV show of it when my dad was a little boy. We used to watch reruns together when I was a girl. Eve Arden played Miss Brooks. Of course, that was many years before she was Principal McGee on Grease." "Grease?" De Bergerac tilted his head in confusion. "What does the Balkan Peninsula have to do with it?" "Don't ask," said Merari, with a tone of warning in her voice that he apparently understood. "You have seen the drama, which is the important thing," the young playwright said in triumph. "I want to write a play based on this story. While other uptimers I've talked to remember the name, none of them admit to having seen it, which makes it all the more intriguing to me, a story so forbidden that even now people will not speak of it." "Our Miss Brooks? Forbidden?" Betsy snorted in an effort to hold in her laughter. "I wouldn't call it scandalous, just obscure." Merari said if anyone in Grantville remembered classic uptime cinema, it would be you, he continued, as if he hadn't heard her. "TV isn't exactly cinema, but it just so happens that I think I can help you anyway." Just then the bell over the door rang again. Betsy's head whipped around. She paled as a young man walked into the room, his eyes scanning the patrons intently. "Oh no, Albert!" She dove under the table and then looked up at Merari's bemused face. "I was never here." "Tell me that isn't really true," Dennis Semsa said when Betsy walked into the room at the back of the Grantville Times offices where he and the other staff artists did most of their work. The air in the room was heavy with the scent of freshly cut wood, and long, thin shavings were scattered all across the floor. "Okay, it isn't true. What are we talking about?" Betsy stared down at the woodcut he had been working on. It showed a number of men and women sitting around a large table filled with piles of books and papers. She picked the carving up and turned it upside down to stare at it. Then she righted it and looked again. What is this? One of the Committee of Correspondence?